This is one of the most horrifying and mysterious cases in South Korean history. The victims ranged in age from 13 to 71. All of them were women, and the number of victims was more than 10. The attacks typically started with a kidnapping, followed by sexual assault, and ended with a brutal murder. The entire case shocked South Korean society for many years. This is the Hwasong serial murder case. You are watching the Hwasong case that shook South Korea. The mystery of a killer fascinated by women in red. As always, if this story left an impression on you, don't hesitate to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated on the most classic criminal cases. This case took place over a span of 5 years, from 1986 to 1991. Except for the year 1989, nearly every year, the killer struck again. And all the crimes happened in Hwasong District, Gyeonggi Province. On September 15, 1986, South Korean police received a report about a body found in a field. The victim was a 71-year-old woman. The lower half of her body was naked, and her arms and legs were tied behind her back. The cause of death was strangulation. 1 month later, at 8 p.m. on October 20th, a 25-year-old woman was attacked on her way to the bus stop after a date. She was left in a drainage ditch with multiple wounds on her chest. The cause of death was strangulation using a sock at the scene. Police found several cigarette butts and a milk carton, likely discarded by the killer after committing the crime. In November, a woman was attacked while she was on her way to church. The attacker tied her hands and feet, then committed the crime. After that, he asked her about money. And when he went to the location to get it, she took the opportunity to escape successfully. This woman was also the only survivor of the Hwasong serial murder case. On December 12th, a 24-year-old woman had dinner with her husband before boarding a bus alone from Suwon to Hwasong. Her husband had to return to work. That dinner would be the last meal they ever shared. 131 days later, her body was found on a levee just 50 meters from her home. By then, the body was severely decomposed, and all her belongings had been stolen. Her underwear had been pulled up over her face, and the cause of death was strangulation with a sock. She was the last victim to be discovered among all the cases in the Hwasong serial murders, just 2 days after the previous woman went missing. On December 14th, a 23-year-old office worker disappeared after going on a date at a cafe in Suwon and taking a bus home. Witnesses said they saw her get off the bus, so it was concluded that she went missing on her way from the bus stop to her house. 7 days later, her body was found in a rice field. Her hands were tied, and traces of the attacker's semen were found at the scene. The cause of death was also strangulation. Forensic tests revealed that the killer had blood type B within just 3 short months. 4 consecutive murders and assaults occurred in Hwasong. However, at that time, the Hwasong police had not connected these cases and investigated them separately. Hwasong was not a large or developed city, so the police's investigative capabilities were limited. But because the crimes happened so close together, were carried out in similar ways, and such incidents had never happened in Hwasong before, the police began to suspect that the cases were related. On November 10, 1987, an 18-year-old high school girl went missing after getting off the bus at 8:50 p.m. following school. The next day, she was found in a field in a condition similar to previous victims. At the scene, police discovered several strands of hair suspected to belong to the killer. At that time, DNA technology in South Korea was not developed, so they could only determine that the killer had blood type B, which was hardly helpful for the investigation because the victim was only 18 years old, very young. The case caused a huge shock in the Hwasong community. Finally, the police realized that these crimes might have been committed by the same person. However, clues about the serial killer remained very scarce. One coincidence was that the killer seemed to only target women wearing red. Because the previous cases remained unsolved, the residents of Hwasong began to panic, putting a lot of Pressure on the police. As a result, South Korean authorities called in investigative experts from all over the country to assist in Hwasong. This may have scared the killer, because afterward, he went silent and didn't commit any more crimes. The police even tried to trap him by having some female officers wear red outfits as bait, but he still vanished without a trace. After 4 months, on the evening of May 2nd, a 30-year-old housewife, carrying an umbrella and about to leave her home to pick up her husband, was attacked on the way. Her body was later found with her upper body naked. The cause of death was strangulation with underwear. Over a year later, on September 7, 1988, a 54-year-old housewife disappeared after leaving a store at 9:30 p.m. to go home. Her body was later found in the grass by the riverbank, her hands tied with underwear, and her mouth covered with a sock and a handkerchief. The cause of death was again strangulation. Underneath her body, police discovered many fragments and peach pits. Unlike previous cases, this one had a witness, a bus driver. As his bus passed near the scene, he suddenly saw someone waving to catch the bus beside the field. The driver stopped to pick the person up and noticed that the lower part of this person's body was covered in mud. Once on the bus, the man kept wiping the mud off his shoes, spoke obscenely, and even asked the driver to borrow a lighter. The driver had a strong impression and even clearly saw the man's face. He looked very ordinary, around 20 to 30 years old, small build, about 165 to 170 meters tall. Based on the bus driver's description, the police completed a sketch of the suspect, but it seemed he had no intention of stopping on the morning of September 16th. A 13-year-old girl was found dead in her room by her mother. The cause of death was strangulation, however. The killer was caught because of a strand of hair left at the scene. He was a 22-year-old man named June. June secretly liked the victim's older sister, who was in high school, but he broke into the wrong room, the younger sister's, and assaulted and killed her. He was not the serial killer, but the way he committed the crime was very similar to the previous cases. Police suspected that Jun was merely copying the serial killer. This means the Hwasong serial murders had a deep negative impact on South Korean society. In 1989, for some reason, the killer did not continue his actions. Then, on November 15, 1990, a 13-year-old girl was attacked while walking home alone at 6:30 p.m. The next day, her body was found hidden in a pine forest, in a condition similar to previous victims. However, this time, the lower parts of her body were stabbed with a pen, fork and spoon. Semen was also found on the sock tied around her neck, and the victim's wrist indicated that the killer had blood type B. Finally, on the evening of April 30, 1991, a 69-year-old woman was killed while returning home at 9:00 p.m. in a pine forest about 150 meters from her house. The cause of death was again strangulation with a sock, and traces of semen were found at the scene. This was the last case in the series of 10 serial murders in Hwasong that the police officially announced. However, in reality, the number of cases did not stop there. Information about the subsequent crimes was never disclosed by the South Korean police. Based on the killer's consistent methods, criminal psychologists speculated that he had been abused as a child or mistreated by women, which caused him to harbor an intense hatred toward women. After analyzing the timing of the crimes, the police noticed that the killer usually struck on holidays, during winter breaks, or exam periods. Therefore, it was speculated that the killer was between 20 and 30 years old, most likely a local high school or college student, since the killer didn't erase his traces. The police believed that his education level and intelligence were not very high. The Hwasong serial murders shocked all of South Korea. The police assigned 205 detectives to investigate 21,280 suspects, analyzed 570 DNA samples, 180 strands of hair, and 40,116 fingerprints, but still found no results. During the investigation, many suspects and even some police officers couldn't bear the pressure and took their own lives. On April 3, 2001, 10 years had passed since the last case in the series, yet the killer remained at large. Meanwhile, South Korea's statute of limitations for this type of crime was only 10 years. So the victims' families lost the right to file civil lawsuits against the killer. On April 3, 2006, the 15-year statute of limitations for prosecuting the last case in the series finally expired. This meant that even if there was enough evidence, or the killer confessed, he could no longer be legally prosecuted. Typically, when a case passes the statute of limitations, continuing the investigation has no legal meaning. All government documents and files related to the case would be destroyed. However, because this case was so significant, under public pressure, the South Korean police decided to preserve all documents and files related to it. In 2007, South Korea revised its criminal procedure law, extending the statute of limitations for murder cases from 10 years to 25 years. The new rule applied to all cases occurring after the year 2000. Unfortunately, this change only affected crimes committed after 2000. So the Hwasong serial murders were not covered under the new law. Decades have passed, yet the Hwasong serial murders remain unsolved. Because of this, it is considered one of the 3 biggest unsolved cases in South Korea. However, on September 18, 2019, an announcement from the police in South Gyeonggi Province once again shook the entire country. The police declared that they had found a suspect in the case because the DNA of a prisoner serving time in Bisan prison matched the DNA found on the underwear from 3 of the 10 Hwasong cases. Among the 10 cases, 1 was confirmed to have been committed by a copycat. So out of the remaining 9 cases, DNA matches were confirmed in 3. The other 6 cases didn't have non-matching DNA. Rather, the DNA evidence was destroyed and couldn't be extracted. The prisoner revealed by the South Korean police was Lee Chun-jae, 56 years old. In December 1993, he had an argument with his wife, after which she angrily left the house and went to stay at her sister's place. 1 month later, on January 13, 1994, Lee Chun-jae called his wife's sister and asked her to come to his house to pack up all of his wife's belongings. Around 7 p.m., Lee Chun-jae's sister-in-law arrived at his house. He gave her a drug that caused her to lose consciousness. After she passed out, he committed his crime against her and ended her life. After the crime, Lee Chun-jae used a motorcycle to move the victim's body to a mechanic's shop about 1 kilometer from his home. 5 days later, he was arrested by the police. In both the trial and the appeal, he was sentenced to death. But the sentence was later changed to life imprisonment. The court ruled that his actions were driven by anger, not premeditation, although he admitted to the crime. According to fellow inmates, Lee Chun-jae always felt he was innocent and showed no remorse for what he had done. On October 2, 2019, the police in South Gyeonggi Province issued a new announcement about the case. During a reinvestigation, Lee Chun-jae confessed to committing 14 murders, including the Hwasong serial killings, as well as over 30 assaults and attempted crimes. Notably, during the original Hwasong investigation, the South Korean police had repeatedly determined that the killer's blood type was B. But after testing Lee Chun-jae's DNA, they found that he has blood type O. We know that DNA testing technology is highly advanced today, so there is no doubt that Lee Chun-jae is the culprit. So why did the police previously identify the killer's blood type as B? The first possibility is that the killer's blood type changed from B to O, but this is highly unlikely and doesn't fit the facts. The second possibility is that the initial conclusion that the killer had blood type B was completely wrong. According to police records, Lee Chun-jae was once considered a suspect, but because his blood type was O, he was removed from the suspect list. Clearly, the evidence from the case was preserved, but why wasn't DNA compared before 2019, and why did they wait until then? In response to this question, the police explained that South Korea didn't have DNA technology at the time, so they had to rely on help from other countries for testing later on. South Korea gradually developed its own DNA technology but was still not perfected due to a lack of experience. Extracting DNA from evidence multiple times could damage it, and each DNA test was very costly. By the time DNA technology in South Korea improved, 15 years had already passed since the case, so they couldn't conduct timely comparisons, fortunately. The DNA comparison was eventually successful. In mid-July 2019, the investigation team sent samples to the National Forensic Service of South Korea for testing. After extracting DNA from the evidence and comparing it with the existing DNA database, the police discovered that Lee Chun-jae's DNA perfectly matched the samples collected from the crime scenes. This allowed the police to officially conclude that Lee Chun-jae was the culprit behind the Hwasong serial killings. However, under South Korean law, retrying cases that happened too long ago has become a complicated issue. South Korea cannot reopen this case because, according to legal regulations, if the statute of limitations has passed, prosecution no longer holds legal value. Still, at this point, Lee Chun-jae will have to spend the rest of his life in prison. And what about you? What do you think about the actions of this twisted killer? Feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments so we can discuss together. Before you go, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to stay updated with the most classic cases on my channel.